Have you ever worried that your child doesn't have a good body image? Well, today on the show, I have Zoë Bisbing. She is a body image and eating disorder psychotherapist, and she's here today to talk about body image in children. And we're going to talk about cultivating a positive body image. We're also going to talk about the signs that your child has a poor body image. So you'll get some awesome questions answered by her today. And I hope you enjoy the show. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Nourished Child Podcast. Jill here, your host, and today I'm joined by Zoë Bisbing, a body image and eating disorders psychotherapist in New York City. She's the mother of 3 and the creator of Body Positive Home. Welcome to the show, Zoë.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm excited to talk about body image on the show. We've talked about it before years ago, and I think it's a good time for a refresher, just given all the things in our world and all the things that have been going on. But before we get going, can you tell our audience, parents and professionals, the work that you do and how you got into the arena of body image and body positive home?
Totally. So as you already said, I'm a psychotherapist and mom of 3. And I guess that is in some ways the answer. I had been working in eating disorder treatment from the beginning of my career. I was always interested. I had been a dancer and I thought I knew a lot about body image issues just from my lived experience. So I thought, oh, maybe when I become a therapist one day, I'll work in body image. And then when I was in grad school, I got an internship and then started working in eating disorder centers and realized that whatever I thought I knew, it was very little compared to sort of what I learned on like inpatient units and understanding like the full expression of these psychiatric illnesses. But as a social worker on an inpatient unit, you do a lot of family work and psychoeducation. And I really loved that, the education part and the family work. And I think when I saw the, sort of most devastating expressions of these illnesses and also the adolescent wing that we had on the unit, I thought I was really interested in knowing what you can do sooner before these become like life compromising illnesses. Mm-hmm. And so I started some specialty training in child and adolescent eating disorders and then became pregnant with my first kid. And then there's just nothing like becoming a parent that, to like make you desperate to figure out what is prevention? Does it exist? And what can I do to prevent this? Which is complicated, the answer to that question, because we can't totally prevent eating disorders. Mm-hmm. But I found myself sort of absorbing multidisciplinary tidbits, from pediatric dietitians and developmental psychologists and pediatricians and social justice workers. And all of a sudden I started to notice that there could be some psychoeducation in the prevention space. So I guess that's how I started getting passionate about Body Positive Home, which is the prevention arm of what I do. But by day, I am a psychotherapist. So I treat eating disorders and body image issues across the lifespan. So prevention and intervention, it's like, and momming,
Yeah.
all 3 things.
Yeah. No, I think oftentimes prevention is treatment in a lot of ways, or they can have like a coin, 2 sides, and they're very, very tightly connected. When we talk about body image, though, I feel like every parent out there listening is going to be like, yeah, I know what body image is, but do you really know what body image is? And I think it would be really helpful as we start this conversation for you to define what body image is and sort of help parents sort of have the foundation for this conversation that we're going to have.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's one of those things where people, they know what it is, but they don't necessarily know what it is. And most people really don't know what makes it worse, what makes it better, like which maybe we'll get to. But body image is a perceptual phenomenon. So it's a combination of how we think about, how we perceive, how we feel about, and then how we behave in reaction to the thinking and feeling and perceiving of our bodies. So it's like the sort of the image we hold in mind of our body, but not just what it looks like, but what meaning we assign to it too. So I call it a perceptual phenomenon because it does live in the brain, right? Mm-hmm. But it is impacted by all sorts of experiences, right? Cultural messages about what bodies should look like, negative feedback we've gotten about our own bodies, lack of representation of our own bodies, sizes and shapes, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it has to do with all that information that you take in and then the meaning you assign to it. And then it becomes this sort of way you see your body, but the way you feel about it, the way you think about it, how important all of that is, and then the actions, right? So what you choose to eat in
Mm-hmm.
relation to how you think about all of those things. But even in the answer, it sounds kind of complicated, right?
Yeah. And when does it develop?
We know that as early as preschool, kids seem to have a sense of what their body looks like, in that, unfortunately, we hear reports of kids that age having negative experiences of their bodies.
Mm-hmm.
But what I think is so amazing is that we're all born with like really healthy body image, meaning we just don't think a whole lot about what we look like. We're like just embodied,
Yeah.
we're just come out embodied, really connected for the most part, most of us, to those internal cues, right? We don't have a body image, or you could think we just have a healthy body image that we just don't think that much. But as we become more and more aware of our body as, I guess you could say, an object, like separate from our mom or separate from others, right? We
Mm-hmm.
start to construct a sense of myself and what I look like. And then, of course, the cultural messages seep in so quickly. And some kids who are just a little bit more tapped into those messages or what's happening around them, added in addition to kids who have more conspicuous bodies that maybe elicit more negative feedback or commentary, right? Those things increase body awareness, body consciousness. And so I think we start to see it emerge as
Yeah.
early as then. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Hey, quick pause. If you've been feeling worried about your child's health, their eating habits, or even their body image, especially if they're growing up in a larger body, I see you. A lot of parents I work with are noticing things like overeating, sneaking food, or a drop in confidence, and they don't want to put their child on a diet, but they do want to help. And that's exactly what I teach inside my group program, Raise a Child Who Thrives. We work on the habits that actually matter. Your home environment, feeding dynamics, food balance, sleep, movement, all through a whole child approach. No dieting, no shame, just practical strategies that work. If you want to get on the wait list for the next group, head to thenourishedchild.com/waitlist. Okay, back to the show. Are certain children, since we're talking about children, are certain children more vulnerable to being sensitive to their body in the world?
Yes. I mean, and it's interesting how that works, because we all have sort of different like levels of porousness, I think, like when it comes to like how porous we are to sort of experiences. And I think about the kids that are more, almost like more observant, right? Like they're more sensitive, maybe a little bit more tuned in to their surroundings, just wired that way.
Mm-hmm.
And those kids might be putting together connections that like adults just accept as like, like body hierarchies, for example. Whereas other kids, even kids that are maybe in larger bodies, but just aren't as, I don't want to say perceptive, but like just aren't as tuned out or zoomed out, right? Like less aware of all of those little things in the environment. They might actually be somewhat more protected early on. I think that as we develop, for the most part, we all get the memo that, we have bodies, people talk about bodies, not all bodies are treated the same. Like at a certain point, it levels out and like we all develop a body image. But I do think that it has a little bit more to do with like temperament and wiring in terms of how soon we develop that awareness. And the same is true, I think, of even feelings. Like you have little kids that just feel feelings really deeply. And so they might be absorbing sadness in the home that they're not feeling, but maybe their mom is depressed or their dad is very stressed, and they're feeling it so deeply, and that's very confusing. Whereas another kid might just be a little bit more protected, just not as aware, and I mean, it's maybe not what we plan to talk about, but it is a a high stress on a more sensitive child, because
Sure.
they're just absorbing more
Sure.
of the matter in the environment, you know?
Yeah. I'm thinking I have 4 kids, and one of my daughters is a psychotherapist,
Oh,
actually, in
oh.
the Boston area. And I think she has always been my more tuned in, more in touch, sensitive uh, member of our family. Not to discount anybody else in the family. Everybody, I feel like, has, some level of that. But it's so interesting when we think about children and how they develop sort of their persona, their self-awareness, their body image. And I know that socially we've talked a lot over the last 5 or so 10 years about body positivity. There's been talk of body neutrality. Can you sort of suss out the difference for parents listening? And not that you need to share what you think is better or not, but it would be interesting to understand how to help parents understand the two sort of concepts, and how they can think about that, how they can think about those for their own families and their own homes.
So body positivity is wildly misunderstood. And I think that always starting with a good definition of this is important. And I'm a bit of an originalist when it comes to my interpretation of body positivity. It has sort of iterated and become something else, which is perhaps why it's confusing. But I think it's important for everyone to understand that body positivity has very little to do with how you feel about your own body. Even though it's body positivity in the title, it's not about feeling positively towards your body. It's actually a social movement from the 1960s that starts really the effort of fat activists that see how body hierarchies operate, that have been told their whole lives, you really need to change in order to be okay. And they say, no, body positivity is a rejection that anyone should have to do that.
Mm-hmm.
The idea of body positivity as a values system is, if you have a body, it's a good body, and you deserve the right to a positive relationship with that body.
Mm-hmm.
So body positivity is a value system about how you regard bodies. You could have body positive values and very negative personal body image, because just because you believe everyone is entitled to a positive relationship with their body doesn't mean it's accessible for you.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't mean it's accessible for anyone else just because you believe it's an entitlement to them, right? So it's really a values system. And I think what happened in the kind of 2000s is body positivity got co-opted on social media as like self-love, like body love, right? That you could, have a body that doesn't look like the ideal, but you should love it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it got misinterpreted, and then, confused with positive body image, which isn't even the distinction you asked me to draw. But body positivity is a value system, whereas body neutrality is actually a stance that you might use for your own relationship to your body, right? So my body positive values might positively impact the way I feel about my body, but it's not a command to think toxic positivity about my body, right?
Mm-hmm.
And because having a positive relationship or regard for one's own body is so hard, especially given the culture, right? This is a body where this is a culture where it's very hard to have a body. There's so much oppression. There's so much judgment. There's so many appearance, ridiculous ideals. Most people are going to end up with pretty poor body image as a result of all that. Body neutrality is an invitation to just practice body respect, tolerating that this is the body I have. I take care of it, even when I don't love the way it looks.
Mm-hmm.
I focus on my body in as neutral a way as I can. So there's no expectation to love what you see. There's no expectation to do positive affirmations. It's the rejection of all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's saying, if you could just work on a feeling of body neutrality, experiencing more neutrality in your thoughts about your body, you might feel better. And it is a better feeling than body loathing, right? So
Yeah, yeah.
long-winded answer, but I wonder if that feels clear.
No, for me it does, and I think that, for parents, I think they get confused because they think through their own lens, right? I'm raising a child. I want to protect my child. What is the avenue that I should be taking here? And I'm curious how you would respond. I think I know how you're going to respond, but I'm curious as to how you respond to that.
Well, I think, and why I call my prevention work Body Positive Home, I think you have to at least try on body positive values
Mm-hmm.
and understand that this is not about bringing toxic positivity into your home. This is not about, telling your kids you must love the way you look, like, or even maybe you need to rethink that even as a goal, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
but what I find about body positive values as I kind of infuse them into every element of the way I try to live my life, you end up instilling in your kids this idea that every body is a human and all humans deserve love and care and dignity and equal access to healthcare and all of these things. And as a result of those values, you have a higher likelihood of helping your kids have a positive regard for themselves
Mm-hmm.
and the body that they live in, and appreciate that you could dislike parts of your body, that we all have hard body moments. That's not
Mm-hmm.
abnormal. We're actually not trying to make those go away, but we want to instill in our kids body respect for others and themselves
Mm-hmm.
so that they can enjoy not just the healthiest relationship with their body, but the highest likelihood that they're going to take care of those bodies over time.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think that from all that, you're going to get better body image, right?
Mm-hmm.
But not necessarily feeling positively about themselves all the time. I think
Yeah.
that's the distinction. I often have to help parents recalibrate their expectations, but the values, the body positive values to me are very anchoring in
Yeah.
we have to start with appreciating that all bodies are good bodies,
Mm-hmm.
and then looking at our own body biases, which body positivity really allows us to do.
Love all of that. And I really love the term body positive values. I had not heard that before. It really resonates. So let's move into signs of struggle. So if a parent, raising their children is starting to suspect, is this, poor self-esteem, or is this a poor body image, and start to worry about how their child feels about their body. And I'm thinking particularly, I work with a lot of children who are growing up in larger bodies, and I know that that is a real parental concern, a real fear of parents, that they won't love their body, they won't respect their body. So what are some of the early signs that parents could be looking out for? And, which ones of those signs, as they develop, require professional support?
It's complicated because kids in larger bodies, if they're starting to notice this and tell you, right, I look fat, or I hate my body. Like, in some ways, we don't even want to call this negative body image yet, because in some ways they're just identifying like the kind of harsh realities of what they're observing, right? If they are larger than their peers, it's not like they have bad body image. They're noticing that they have less body privilege than their peers, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I do think that we have to expect, certainly kids in larger bodies, but plenty of kids even that are not in larger bodies, we have to expect that they're gonna, and hope that they'll talk to us about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
I always remind parents that if you have a kid, regardless of their size, and they're coming to you to complain about their body, you've done something kind of right, in that they're coming to you, because the alternative is that they're alone with those thoughts and feelings, and we don't want that, right? To answer your question, I think that kids that are complaining or crying, or seem to be having negative body feelings, we want to make sure that it's not like happening all the time, right? Sometimes a kid will come and they'll cry, my belly's so big, and then you're able to sort of support them, like help them navigate that like very painful body grief, right? But then you see them bounce the next day. They're off to soccer. They're eating their yummy cheeseburger for dinner. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you're not seeing any sort of compensatory behaviors. Like, you're not seeing body checking or trying to move around a lot more, or I don't want the burger bun tonight, right? Like, there's a difference between a kid that's just having thoughts and feelings and
Mm-hmm.
a kid that's taking any kind of action that seems connected to those thoughts and feelings.
Yeah.
So I want to make that distinction because I think that's actually really important. And then I would say the other metric is like, how often is that kid talking about this? You know, I hear from parents, I'm sure you do too, where it's constant, where the kid just can't stop expressing misery about the way they look.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that whether your kid is starting to take action that seems related to the negative thoughts and feelings, or the negative thoughts and feelings are getting expressed, you know, more than once in a while, this is where like we need a professional to help guide us, because this is a very high risk kid.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And does poor body image show up differently in younger children than it does in, say, like a teen? Would a teenager be more likely to take some action versus a child more likely to just complain and express their feelings?
Definitely, because
Yeah.
often little kids, like, they don't have the kind of, that's just not how their minds work. They're
Mm-hmm.
not aware yet that you could change the way you look based on what you eat. Like, which is why, and I know from your work, it's like, this is why education early on for kids, nutrition education, you know, or talking to kids about what foods are, you know, healthy and unhealthy, or what foods make you fat, is so dangerous, because
Mm.
you're this is not developmentally appropriate, right?
Right.
There are younger kids that, you know, are outliers that sort of have a sense already, maybe because they've been told, that like have a sense that if I eat less, I'll be smaller, right? But it's more likely that an older kid, a teen, would make that connection and then take action
Mm-hmm.
than a younger kid who might just be stuck in complaints. But both a younger kid and a teen might be pulling on their shirt a lot or looking in the mirror a lot, like to sort of essentially body check. Like,
Mm-hmm.
that just might be a kind of intuitive reflex. But absolutely, it's a good question, because I think younger kids don't need the burden of knowing those things.
No, no. Thankfully their brain isn't really ready for sort
Yeah.
of processing all of that. I know from my own work and being a mom myself, it can be just so heartbreaking to watch your child talk negatively about themselves or be so worried about their body, or not understand why their friends are all in smaller bodies and how come they have to be in the larger body. This is a lot of stuff that I hear, and I'm curious how you support that parent, because I feel like the parents struggle with this, not their own body. We can talk about their own body dissatisfaction, but the struggle with watching your child say these things, hearing your child say these things, watching your child do these, maybe activities like restrict or over exercise. But the grief and the struggle for the parent is really quite real. And I'm curious, as a psychotherapist, how you sort of help parents in that way.
I think, first of all, making a lot of space for them to talk about how painful it is.
Mm-hmm.
Because, you know, it wouldn't be appropriate for a parent to say to a child, "This is so painful for me,"
Right.
but I don't think parents realize how difficult it is. It's maybe not too dissimilar from parents that have like a neurodivergent child, or parents that have a child with any kind of special need. Like, it is incredibly hard to be the parent of a child that has less privilege in
Mm.
one way or another. And I think parents need a lot of room to be crying about that, to be angry, yelling about that, and to have a place, a safe place to talk about how they feel about their child's body. I think a lot of my work, when I have a support group for parents that are kind of going through this, and we talk plenty about the body, the grief that they're feeling or the sadness that they're feeling on behalf of their child. But I want parents to also be able to have a safe place, so we protect their child from it, to talk about how much they hate having a child in a larger body, or how repulsed they are by the fat rolls on their child's body, or how painful it is to see their kid's friend or their friend's kid in a smaller body, and how much envy they have. Like, these are just human emotions, and we are all carrying anti-fat bias in us. So I think that parents need a safe container to feel like they can say all the ugly things, right? So that they can show up with more unconditional love and acceptance for their child. So I think that's all part of it. And most parents don't even think to get a therapist to cope with this for themselves. They think, let me take my child to a dietitian who will make them smaller, which is not you, I know, but like,
No.
it's like they need a lot of support, because it's so hard, especially if you're committed to not putting your child on a diet.
Yes.
It's really, really hard.
Yeah.
I'm curious what you think of what I'm saying, given that you know this experience.
My eyes and my ears are perked up a little bit, because I think that, having a space to say the ugly things is going to be something that people are going to be surprised to hear, because I don't think that we allow for that in our society. And I also know that so many parents feel a great deal of shame around this topic, and just having a place to process that shame, because a lot of times they don't understand that how they feel is really a product of our social standards and the oppression that their family is experiencing just by having a child in a differently sized body. And so it's refreshing for me to hear you talk about this, because I don't think a lot of people are even thinking about that as an option.
I think you're right, because it's so taboo. And I think even when people come into that, I mean, my group is a very unique space, plus like individual therapy, because I will draw that out of my individual clients. But they say, I know I shouldn't think this. I know I shouldn't say this. And then when they say it, and they know no one judged them, their child didn't hear, and it was safe, they feel better. And then we say, you're not a bad person that you had that thought. You were just raised in diet culture like me. And this system is to blame. It's not you. Yeah. And you have to find somewhere to dump that, because what happens when we don't? It comes out in the vibe when you and your kid are sitting and they go for a second cookie.
And they get the side eye.
They feel it. Even if you don't do the side eye, they feel it.
They feel it
coming out of your pores, Yes. And you talk to any kid or any adult that had a parent that didn't have a support group like I'm talking about, and it comes out in all of those ways, right?
It does.
And it makes it all so much harder, both for the parent and the child. So yeah, I like the way you put it, say the ugly thing, but in a safe, protected space, because our children are not our therapists, and they should never be aware of those sort of ugly thoughts that we're having. But you have to be aware of the ugly thoughts you're having, because if you're not aware, you have then no control over what happens in the dynamic, right?
Yeah. And so let's talk a little bit about that dynamic, or that vibe that can happen in the home from the parent who hasn't found an outlet for sort of grieving or processing the shame or processing the ugly thoughts and feelings. What happens? Play this out for the listeners.
Yeah. Well, I think it might come through in food control. So, and it might just be under the guise of, I'm just trying to, make sure you're healthy. It might come through in different treatment of different kids in different body sizes. Two sisters both want to wear midriffs, but like, it just does not feel the same with the larger bodied kid. Whereas the younger one, it does feel okay, but like, that might actually make a person pause to be like, why do I feel that way? I think it it might come out in more commentary or more pressure to be moving, like it might even come out as bringing your kid to the doctor and I was going to say not protecting them from weight stigma at the doctor, but like bringing weight stigma to the doctor, asking inappropriate questions about your child's weight or growth, right in front of the kid. I think there's so many different ways, but I think it's never unrelated to this, right? It's just ever present. And I think we already kind of said it. I think the way you look at your child's body, I think is one of those things where we're doing 3 million things at home. We're doing the laundry, we're trying to cook dinner, but it's that extra gaze, like your sort of increased awareness when that particular child goes to the pantry. It's like there's a kind of surveillance vibe, and so much of this is, I use the word vibe all the time because it's not always so overt. I think we could all agree that the most obvious version is like, don't eat that, your belly will get even bigger than it already is. Sadly, so many people had that experience, or we got to go to Weight Watchers. Thankfully, I think they went under, it's like,
no, they're alive and well.
Yeah. At least they're honest that you need a GLP-1 to sustain their diet plans. But yeah, I thought I heard some murmurings of some kind of chapter 11, but anyway, they are alive and well. But I think it's the subtle stuff that you and I are talking about right now.
Yeah. Hard to quantify.
It's hard to quantify. Exactly. That's why it's sort of like these little moments, it's when your kid, let's say they're little, but they are bigger. And when they're taking their clothes off to get into the bathtub and you feel this like disgust, and then you just sort of look at them in a way that doesn't look joyful and something gets transmitted and the child has no idea at that point. But it's a million moments like that shows up in the relationship and then makes it a lot harder at the dinner table, right?
Yeah.
Because there's just, the vibe is not right,
Right. Yeah. And so part of addressing that or working through that is working through it with a therapist. But for those listeners out there who may not have access to a therapist, this might be the only thing they ever listen to on this topic. Yeah. What would you say to those parents about being more aware, processing positively some of their thoughts and feelings, and creating a vibe that is positive and loving and happy and
safe?
Yeah, safe.
Yeah, I think knowing that this happens, right? Like, so that's the hopefully increased insight. Oh, I could notice my thoughts. So noticing your thoughts, really with a ton of self-compassion, reminding yourself, I'm not a bad person for having these thoughts. In fact, I'm trying to get to know my thoughts and feelings towards my child's body better in the service of unconditional love, right? To try to kind of capture those thoughts in real time, maybe write them down in a very safe, secure place where your child can't find them. Ideally, you have maybe a partner or a friend that is sort of interested in this topic too, maybe listens to this episode with you, right? And is like a friend you could maybe vent to or share some of what you're noticing, how you feel. Again, a journal in a very safe place could be another way to do this. And to remember, it's not your fault that you're having these thoughts. It doesn't make you a bad person or a bad parent. And sort of to kind of, again, create space between the thoughts and the feelings and you and your child, right? And also to try to get interested in learning about anti-fat bias. We can certainly, you can recommend resources to learn about what anti-fat bias is. Virginia Sole-Smith wrote a great book called Fat Talk that might be a great book to read, just to learn more about why we feel this way about bigger bodies. I mean, by the way, this sort of work applies even if you have a kid who's like just very short or very differently shaped, or, it doesn't have to just be larger bodies, but that's kind of what we're talking about right now. But to make space for all those feelings, to understand that the body grief you might be feeling, or the grief you might be feeling that you didn't get a more typically shaped kid, and maybe try to hear my voice when you do this journaling. You're not a bad parent. You're not a bad person. You've been harmed by these systemic oppression, body oppression, and your kid can still live a wonderful life. Like, whatever fear fantasies you have about what's going to happen to them if they live in this body, those are fantasies. They're not facts. And we want to think about clearing the cleaning the vibe of our own judgment, right? So that we have a higher chance of helping them nurture that body respect, right? Mm-hmm. The positive relationship with their bodies, not because they love how it looks, but that they feel good about their bodies are wise, their bodies do things, their bodies can talk to them in terms of their appetite, etc. And that we can take care of your body, and I can help my kid take better care of their body if I keep doing this private work.
Yeah. That's great. No, that's awesome. Let's shift to treatment using body image therapy, because I think a lot of listeners out there will be listening to this episode and might be thinking, ooh, I might need to engage with a therapist around my child's body image. I see this moving in the direction that I don't want it to go, and I want to intervene. So I would love to just help parents understand what it means to go to a therapist for body image therapy. What happens in the process? What are the goals? And what are some of the realistic outcomes that parents could be thinking about?
It's interesting. Most of the time, if I'm being honest, by the time a parent is coming to me with their kid, unfortunately, it's not just body image. There's some kind of disordered eating as well. Mm-hmm. And, and then if that's the case, we have to focus on addressing the eating disorder behaviors before we're really going beyond into the body image work, even though, of course, regulating the eating is supporting the body image. But I think your question speaks to how, I don't know, it's like we wait till things are really bad before we get support.
On both ends of the spectrum, a lot of times on both ends. Yeah,
it's true. I mean, but oftentimes body image work, it starts with trying to understand what a teen is feeling, like what sometimes you say your relationship with your body. Adults know what that means, but younger people don't always have a sense of my relationship to my body, what? But to try to do an inventory of what kinds of thoughts do you have? How much of your day is spent thinking about your body? Mm-hmm. How much of your brain is occupied? Sometimes we'll draw a pie chart, how much, and usually it's 75% or more, and it's oh my gosh, would it be a good goal to think less about your body? Most of the time, yes. I would prefer not to think about it, even though oftentimes kids or adults who are already there are afraid to stop thinking so much about their body for fear of what will happen, But in terms of, I guess I'm going backwards with the question, the goal is to, at least my goal for folks, is to think less about your body and live more from inside your body, Yeah. Oftentimes we discover, and this sort of answers the question about the work, we often discover a lot of behaviors that are going on that are maintaining the negative body image or maintaining the body preoccupation, right? So body checking is a good example, right? If people are, again, this really cuts across all ages, but the more we're sort of checking on our bodies, the more preoccupied we are. Even if we're checking to reassure ourselves, it doesn't actually work. We just check more. Yeah. The same might go for covering up, right? Mm-hmm. Sometimes people are surprised to learn that the covering up to feel safer in my body is actually reinforcing the belief that my body must be covered up. Mm-hmm. And so maybe we're working on exposures to sort of get more comfortable without covering up, or we might do mirror exposure work. We're kind of retraining the eye to look with more neutrality. That's a body neutrality practice. One other thing I'll say, because it's just so important for all of us, sometimes just making sure that the clothing we have access to actually fits.
Yeah.
And it's like the materials are not distracting, that the waist isn't too tight. Like sometimes people's body image, all that they need is a different pair of pants to feel better immediately, and so, it depends on the situation, but those are some examples of kind of goals. And
yeah, I know that's finding clothes that preteen girls or teenage boys want to wear, feel good in, is a real challenge for families, in my experience anyways. Anything else in terms of, if parents are listening as we wrap this up, as they're listening, they might be thinking, well, I would really like to make one change today. What's one change they could make that would be fairly easy to make, fairly effective, and sort of get them moving in the right direction, either for their child or for themselves?
I think asking yourself, if you had to imagine from your child's point of view, what do you think they would say the vibe is like with you around their body and food? Like, what do you think from their POV? Just to ask yourself that.
That's a good one.
You like that?
Yeah, that's a good one.
What do you like about that one?
I just think self-awareness. I think in the work that I do with families, oftentimes by the end of our work together, and I could be working with families for 3 months or 6 months, so we are working a lot together. And oftentimes at the end of the whole thing, the parents will say something like, I learned so much more about me then, of course I learned, food balance or movement or sleep, or I've learned all these, healthy habits. But at the end of the day, I learned so much about my role in this and about me. Yeah. And that brings me just forward so much in sort of the relationship with their child.
Exactly. Because it's like these invisible things that clog up or that sort of infect that dynamic and the relationship, and they are barriers to closeness. And a close relationship in some ways, it's the best thing we can offer. And we can't protect our kids from the world. No, we can't. Appearance ideals are frightening right now. There's social media. It's very hard out there. But we can create the conditions in the home and in the relationships to make kids feel seen and heard and safe and unconditionally accepted, so that they have a higher likelihood of internalizing that for themselves. Yeah. And I do think, what you said, like look at yourself, or, work on your own body image, your relationship with food. I think a way in might be to ask yourself, if you really had to be honest with yourself, think about it from your child's point of view. What do you think they feel? What do you think they feel that they couldn't even articulate, right? That you might be able to articulate, especially in light of everything we're talking about. Yeah, that's so good, Zoe. Thank you so much. I love this episode, and I want my listeners to be able to connect with you, especially around this topic. Where can they find you, and where can they find Body Positive Home? Yeah, thank you so much. I loved our conversation. You can find me certainly on Instagram at My Body Positive Home, and on Substack. That's where I offer parent workshops and weekly Dear Zoe, kind of longer form question answer stuff. And on Substack, that's where I kind of host my parent support group as well, through my membership there. Great. So that's, on Substack, Body Positive Home, and Instagram. Those are probably the best places to find me. Awesome. And you're in New York City. So if anybody's listening in New York and wants to get in connect with you, I'm sure they wouldn't have a problem finding you. Absolutely. That's true. I also, of course, my actual job is my therapy practice. I always forget about that. And that's like what I actually get paid to do. I mean, I get paid, but it's funny. I always forget that Body Positive Therapy NYC is that's my website. You could actually find that too. Turning business away. Well, thank you so much. It's been a delight to meet you and have you on the show. Thank you, Jill.
Thanks for listening to the Nourished Child Podcast, where the #1 goal is to help you grow a nourished child inside and out.